Welcome to Civil Science Academy. Today I am starting a new series on lexicon ethics for GS4 UPS. This subject is one of the most important parts of the exam. The best part is it's not only important but also one of the most interesting and easiest subject to understand if approached correctly. In ethics, it is very important to know both concept and also the meaning of every key term. For example, attitude, values, moral, immoral, and many more. You must understand not just the definitions but also how these ideas are applied in public administration and even in other areas of life and organization. For this series, I will be using the latest edition of the Lexicon book for ethics. We will cover the content topic by topic. Since the book has large topics, I will break them down into smaller and easy to understand by parts. That way you can follow along comfortably. Here how we will proceed. I will prepare slides based on directly on the lexicon ethics book, and while explaining I will guide you through each concept step by step. You can treat these videos as short notes, but I also encourage you to make your own handwritten notes while watching. After that you should read the book yourself for deeper understanding. So let's not waste any more time. We will begin with our very first concept, ethics and human interface. Now, what do you mean by ethics? So in simple words, ethics is the study of human actions to determine whether they are right or wrong. The ethics provides us with a moral compass. It tells us how to act, how to make decisions, and how to live in a way that promotes goodness and avoid harm. The ultimate aim of the ethics is happiness, but not just temporary or selfish happiness. Ethics talks about the kind of happiness that comes from doing what is right, fair, and good for both ourselves and society also. For example, cheating in an exam. Imagine a student cheats in an exam and gets good marks. On the surface, he may feel happy because he passed the exam, but is that the real happiness? No, because he knows he did something wrong, and if discovered, he will face punishment and also lose respect. Ethics teaches us that such actions are not truly good even if they give short-term result. For another example, suppose you find a wallet full money on the road. You got two choices: keep the money for yourself or return it to its rightful owner. Ethics guides you to choose the second option. The returning the wallet may not give you financial gain, but it gives you inner satisfaction, self-respect, and trust from the society. That is true happiness. For example, I will give you another example. A doctor has the knowledge and power to prescribe medicines. If a doctor prescribes unnecessary medicines just to earn more money, is that ethical? No, ethics demands that a doctor's duty is to heal the patient honestly. Acting otherwise harm both the patients and society trust in the medicine, right? And for another example to understand clearly, in government service, an officer might face pressure to favor a friend or relatives in a tender process. If he chooses favoritism, it benefits one person but harms the society. Ethics guides the officer to impartial and fair, ensuring public trust and the justice. Ethics sets the standard of right and wrong. It guides us to choose actions that lead to genuine happiness, both for ourselves and also for the society we live in. Now that we understand the meaning of ethics, let's move on the next part, that is ethics in public administration. In administration, ethics play a very crucial role. Why? Because administrators handle resources, power, and responsibilities that directly affect people's lives. If they act unethically, the whole society will suffer, right? For example, the collector handling the flood relief fund. Suppose a district collector is responsible for distributing the flood relief funds. If he thinks only about himself or his personal benefit, corruptions can happen, right? The money may be misused and the real victims may not receive the help they deserve. But if the collector follows the ethics, he will remember his duty is to serve the people. By being honest, transparent, and fair, he ensures that relief reaches those who truly needs it. That is how ethics protects public interest. Okay, now the origin of the ethics word. The word ethics comes from the Greek word that is ethos, which means character. It is also connected to the Latin word the moralis, which means custom. Because of this, ethics is often called as moral philosophy. It studies human character, customs, and actions to decide what is right and what is wrong. Now we move on the next concept, that is ethics and philosophy. Now ethics is actually a branch of philosophy. The philosophy deals with fundamental questions of life like truth, justice, knowledge, and existence. Within that, ethics specifically ask what is right, what is wrong, how should we live. These are the questions they will ask. But remember, ethics is not about blindly following the customs or the tradition. Instead, ethics helps us question whether those customs are just and fair. For example, untouchability. In the past, untouchability was practiced as a custom, but ethically it was wrong because it violated the principle of human dignity and equality. Ethics helped society realize that this custom should be abolished, right? For another example, the sati system, the old practice of sati forced widows to sacrifice their lives on their husband's funeral pyre. It was tradition, but from an ethical and philosophical perspective, it was unjust, inhuman, and denied women to right to life. The reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy argued against it using ethical reasoning. So, ethics as philosophy is not about following tradition blindly. It is about thinking critically and choosing values that are fair, universal, and beneficial for humanity. Now we move on the next slide. That is evolution of the ethics. The ethics is as old as humanity itself. From the very beginning, human beings have tried to understand what is right and what is wrong. In the early stage, at first, ethics was not written down in books. Right, the parents and elders would orally teach younger generations about good behavior, honesty, fairness, and social responsibility. These moral lessons became the foundation of ethical life in the small communities. Now, as societies grew, the people began to write down these moral rules. The religious texts, community laws, and social codes reflected the ethical values of that time. This is how the evolution of ethics are formed. The systematic study in the West, that is, in the West, the formal and systematic study of ethics began with the philosopher Socrates in the 5th century BC, and he was among the first to ask deep questions about justice, virtue, and the good life. And we will cover in the coming slides. And in the Greek ethics, the thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and in the medieval ethics, they dominated by the religion, especially the Christian and Islamic thought. The ethics was closely tied to divine law and the idea of sin and virtue. For example, the St. Thomas Aquinas connected philosophy with the Christian theology and the contemporary ethics. In today's world, ethics deals with the complex issues such as human rights, environmental responsibility, gender equality, and global justice. For example, debates on climate change, bioethics, and artificial intelligence, like that. And now the ethics evolved from oral tradition to written codes, from religion-based rules to rational philosophy, and today it addresses modern global challenges. This is how the evolution of ethics are formed. Now we move on the next slide. That is the Greek thinkers. Let's now look at how the great Greek philosophers explained ethics in very simple way. First one, Socrates. In the 5th century BC, he told people to question their beliefs. Instead of blindly accepting the customs, he encouraged critical thinking, like why is this right, why is this wrong. His method of questioning laid the foundation for ethical reasoning. Okay, the next one is the Plato. He believed there is a moral truth, that is something universally right and beyond personal opinion. For example, justice is always right no matter what the society says. Right, in ethics, for Plato, it means discovering and following this eternal truth. Okay, the next one is Aristotle. In his book Nicomachean Ethics, he explained that virtue lies in the middle path. For example, courage is a virtue. If you lack courage, you are a coward. If you take foolish risk, you are a reckless. But true courage is the balance between these two extremes. Okay, and these things are just a basics, and you don't need to worry about that. Just underline in your textbook and move on. Now the coming chapters are really important, but don't worry. Right now we are just going to the core basics so that you can understand deeply later. This video is more of an overall introduction. So if you feel, oh, this is tough, I am not getting, and don't think like that. This is only the beginning. So it will take a little time to get used to. And if you don't understand in one time, just watch the video again, it will become clear. Okay, all right, now let's move the medieval period of ethics. In medieval times, religion guided the ethics. The people believed strongly that living a good life on earth and preparing for the afterlife were connected. For example, Saint Augustine said that ethics is about both living well on earth and preparing the soul for salvation in heaven. The later came the Thomas Aquinas, who tried to connect Aristotle's philosophy with Christian teachings. He explained that human nature and God must be seen together. So ethics was not only about reason, but also about faith. Okay, now let's move to the last part of this overview. That is the modern period. With the rise of science, industry, and democracy, the new ideas started coming in. Thinkers like Francis Bacon and René Descartes stressed on reasoning instead of just following the tradition. Then we have the big names like Hobbes, Locke, Hume, Kant, and Mill. All of them shaped the modern ethical thought. Okay, and the focus on utilitarianism. That means the greatest good for the greatest number. It will cover in coming chapters, don't worry. And others focused on idealism. Means the following higher moral principles and duty. Now the next comes the contemporary period. And now in today's complex society, new ethical principles are developed. The thinkers like G.E. Murray, the Buber, Marshall, Levinas, and others talked about the ideas like the transparency, accountability, human dignity, rights and justice in a modern democracy. Okay, so this completes our first concept of ethics. Today's session was like an overview, just to give you the big picture. Don't get confused if it feels heavy. It's just the beginning. Keep reading, keep revising, and slowly everything will make sense. Okay, that's all for today's lecture. I will upload the next topic in the coming days. Till then, keep learning, stay motivated.